so we can go ahead and kick it off. Again, I just wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our presentation on caregiving as we're celebrating National Caregivers Month. My name is Heather Miller. I'm an adult programming librarian with the La Crosse Public Library, and I'm so glad you could join us for this evening's author talk with Ramie Liddle, who is the author of this amazing book, Driving Miss Norma. So we're super excited to have Ramie and hear about her incredible caregiving journey. So thanks so much for joining us, Ramie.
I am so happy to be with you guys tonight. And I love seeing everyone's face. So thanks for logging on. Wow. So everyone's muted, but I have a couple questions. So maybe we can just do a thumbs up. I'm curious. I'm always curious about who I'm talking with, and wondering if anyone has read the book, or if you're going to listen to this little talk and then decide to read it. So just put a thumbs up if you read the book already. Looks like 1, 2, 3 people that I can see. There's some people that I can't see. Okay, great. So I'm going to assume it's a mixed bag. And did anyone happen to follow us when we were on our journey on Facebook a few years back? No. Okay. That's helpful. And the other thing is, who here has been a caregiver for someone with advanced illness in any time in their lives? A few of you have done that too. Okay, great. Well, those of you who have been a caregiver or have been around them, our experience, in my experience, is I certainly was not planning on being a caregiver, had no idea that would ever show up in my life. I didn't even have children. So I thought, I'm not going to ever have to do that. And my husband and I have been married for 20 years, and he had a sister who made it very clear that she would take care of the parents, and so not to worry about that. So Tim didn't consider being a caregiver either. And we lived a pretty non-traditional life. We were nomads, traveled all over the country in a small 19-foot Airstream travel trailer. So likely smaller than the room that you're sitting in right now, was our entire living space. And we traveled with our dog Ringo, who is a 73-pound standard poodle. So he's a big guy, and he's on the cover of the book. If you've seen that cover photo, that's Ringo. So we kind of blissfully traveled around the country, spent time in Canada, spent time in Mexico, most of our winters in Baja, Mexico, on the beach. We could live off the grid there, and kind of made a community of wonderful, lovely people there. And every summer we would kind of make a lap around the United States, and eventually ending up in northern Michigan. So not terribly far away from where you guys are. And that's where Tim's parents lived, Leo and Norma. And they were very independent, and lived by themselves in their own home without any assistance for many, many years. Norma was 90, Leo was 88. And we would go up there every summer and spend a good amount of time there, kind of doing their honey-do list, and making sure that things were taken care of in their home, and that they were safe, and that they had enough food. One year, Tim, my husband, is an incredible cook. And so Norma made it clear that she was just tired of cooking. She had been cooking for 75 years, and she just was done with it. And so Tim took it upon himself to make 300 meals so that they would have dinner every night until we got back around to visit them again. And so those were the kinds of things we were taking care of, but never expected to be a hands-on caregiver in the home. And then very unexpectedly and tragically, Tim's sister died. She was 44 years old. And so that certainly changed things a little bit. Tim made a deathbed promise to his little sister that he would take care of his mom and dad. didn't have any idea what that would look like. But he was the only one left. And so in the summer of 2015, we were making our way across the country. We were in North Carolina when we got a call that Uncle Ralph had just died. That was Norma's only remaining sibling, and they were very close. And we said, we don't have time to make it up to the funeral. We can't get there quickly enough, but we'll be there soon enough. And so we made it up there as soon as we could. And Norma sounded real strong on the phone. Everything was okay. They were sad, of course, but seemed to be doing fine. We pulled in the driveway, and what normally happens is they come out and meet us, and Norma has cookies baked for us, and Leo helps us park the RV just perfectly in the driveway, and we, carry on with our visit. And this time they didn't come out of the house and didn't meet us in the driveway, which was odd. So we wandered into their home, and here we found Norma and Leo kind of in this awkward side embrace, where Norma was trying to help Leo get back to his chair. And obviously something was very wrong. He was screaming in pain. She's tiny. She might have been 5 foot tall at the prime of her life, but certainly wasn't that at 90 years old, and trying to help him out. And so the short story of that is that within 10 days, Leo went from being fine to he had fallen and had a compression fracture in his back, and that's what caused the stress right when we arrived. And he declined very quickly, and 10 days later he died. While we were sitting with him in the hospital and just trying to sort out if he was going to do okay or not, Norma just kind of tugged on my sleeve and said, "Can you take me downstairs? I have an appointment." And that was the first that we knew that she had anything going on. And I said, "Well, sure." So, we got in the elevator to go downstairs in the local hospital. And I said, "What's going on? What's this appointment for?" And she said, "Oh, they found some blood in my urine, and they just want to check it out. I don't think it's much of anything." And it turned out that it was more than just a little something. And within 2 days after her husband died, she was diagnosed with uterine cancer, and it didn't look good. We had an idea that this diagnosis might be coming, and had a conversation, and it was the first time in our family's history that we approached this elephant in the room of talking about advance directives, talking about what your wishes are at the end of life. It was so hard, and for years we put it off. We often talk to ourselves about, this is the year we're going to talk to your mom and dad about, how they're going to take care of themselves if they can't stay in the house. And we never got around to it. We were terrified of that conversation. And so now it was time. And so before we went in for that final diagnosis, we were sitting at the dining room table and said, "Norma, it's possible that what this doctor has to say is not going to be good news." And she said, "Yeah, I know." And she said, "I also know that I can't live here by myself anymore. I need, Leo's help, and he's not here." And so Tim and I really hadn't talked about this at all between the two of us. But we were trying to figure out, well, what are her options now? Her house was too small for us to move into it. Like sometimes that happens. And so we offered to look for a long-term care facility for her where she could live, or like a lot of adult children of aging parents, we also offered, well, you could come live with us. And remember, our house was 19 feet long and 8 feet wide and was on wheels. And so we put that on the table. We had never talked to each other about it. Didn't consider the pro and con list of whether or not this was a good idea. and didn't consider, what's this going to do for our marriage? We don't really know Norma that well. Tim left home at 19 years old. He really didn't feel like he knew his mom very well. But out it came out of our mouths onto the table. And we said, look, you don't need to give us an answer right away. We have lots of things to take care of, the kind of paperwork of end of life with her husband. And so think about it, pray about it. Whenever you're ready to give us an answer, we'll do whatever you want. We'll find the appropriate place for you to live. She also made it clear to us that she didn't want any treatment. She said, I'm 90 years old. I don't want to be poked and prodded. If they tell me it's cancer, I don't want to do chemo and radiation. She was very clear about that. So we felt like we had the information that we needed to then become her advocate. When it was time to go talk to this last doctor. So the day came, we went into the doctor's office. And again, this is 2 days after her husband died. They had been married for 67 years and were just a beautiful couple. They had a lovely marriage, raised 2 great kids. And this is really a deep moment of grief for her and for us, of course. We go into the doctor's office and he said, yep, sure enough, you have uterine cancer. And we're going to start off by doing hysterectomy, and then we'll do chemotherapy and then radiation. And then we'll take you into a long-term, or not long-term care, we'll take you into a rehabilitation place where you can work on some rehabilitation for a while. And then after that, you'll move into a nursing home. And so he lined out, there it was, that was the rest of her life. And she just kind of sat there and was wordless and motionless in this giant, she's a very tiny lady in this giant hospital wheelchair looking up at this doctor. And he didn't give her any other options other than, these are the steps that we're going to take. This is what you do when you have uterine cancer. But then he said, what would you like to do? And she looked at him and she sat up as tall as she could in that wheelchair. And she said, I'm 90 years old. I'm hitting the road. And the doctor looked at us and like, what is she talking about? And so Tim had to jump in and say, look, we live on the road and, it may seem unconventional and perhaps even a little bit irresponsible, but that's one of the options that we have given her, knowing that this bad news possibly could come our way. And the doctor at first was shocked, and then he really listened to us. And we said, are we being irresponsible? Is this something that really is a bad idea? And he said, as doctors, we see this every day. And especially with older women and someone that's in the condition that she was under 100 pounds at this point. He said, the likelihood that she makes it through the initial surgery is not guaranteed. And if she does, it's possible that she ends up directly into ICU. There's horrible side effects, and her quality of life will not be there, no matter what. That's where she's at this point. He said, if it were me in this situation, I would want to be in that motorhome. And so we just went right on. Okay, here we go. We have the doctor's blessing to do this. And again, we had no idea what we were doing, but we knew how to live on the road. We knew we needed a bigger rig. And so we started with that. We also asked him, if her condition starts to decline while we're out driving around, or what if she dies in the night? What do we do? And he said, well, if she dies while you're traveling, then wherever you are, just call 911 and they'll help you out with that. They know what to do. If her condition begins to decline, no matter where you are in the United States, call the local hospice and they will help you. And so we were armed with this these pieces of information that empowered us a little bit to be like, okay, we can do this. Can't be that bad. And so then it took us 5 weeks to get all of his affairs completed, and to buy a bigger motorhome so that we could all fit. And we talked about, well, what do we need, and how can we live together in a very small space? And then, where do you want to go, Norma? And asked her about her bucket list. And she said, well, I don't have a bucket list. And she said, I stacked her up on her little table next to her recliner in the living room with all kinds of travel guides and encyclopedias and all these different places that we could go in the country. And I said, just look through all of these and tell me where you would like to go. And she would sort through them every day. She'd sit there while we were busily trying to get other things done, and really didn't come up with anything great. I was really hoping for this tremendous bucket list and these dreams that she had been hoping for. And she's like, it all looks nice. Let's just go. And I begged her a little bit more, and she came up with 2 things. She wanted to go to see the president's heads, which we decided that must be Mount Rushmore. And so we put that on our list. And then she also said she wanted to go to New Mexico. And when I asked her what her interest was in New Mexico, she really couldn't tell us. But she said, I've just been really curious about New Mexico, and I would like to go there. So that was our starting point. And since we were up in, we were just south of the Mackinac Bridge in northern Michigan. So we were up in that northern tier. And so we thought, well, that's pretty convenient to start there and head out, head west to Mount Rushmore. While we were there, we would check out Yellowstone and the Tetons and then go from there. She loves the natural world. She really enjoyed the national parks. That was something that she had never experienced before. But about, I don't know, I'd say about 3 hours once we finally got out of the driveway, she caught a cold, and we thought for sure, oh, this must be it. She's going to die. Like, we're not going to make it to Mount Rushmore. We didn't know anything about her health really, other than she had this tumor. And so once we got over that initial anxiety and she recovered from her little cold, off we went. And still in this state of grief, in this state of anxiety, and not really knowing each other very well. By the time, you guys might know this more than some of the people that I've talked to around the country, in Blue Earth, Minnesota. Have any of you ever happened to be there? It's not very far from where you are. Yeah, I see some hands and some nods. We were just kind of trucking along and just kind of in this, I don't know what the right adjective is. We were in a kind of gray, gloomy state of mind, but we were determined to carry on with this trip. And we got to Blue Earth, Minnesota, and Tim and I had been there before, and we happened to know that there is the world's largest Jolly Green Giant statue in the parking lot between the Dairy Queen and the Walmart in Blue Earth, Minnesota. And I was really struggling. I struggle with depression and anxiety sometimes. And I also love to take photographs. And so Tim said, while we're doing this, go out and take some pictures. We're going to be in some pretty places, and maybe that'll help with your depression. And so I was like, yeah, he's right. So I decided to always have my camera with me. So we show up at the Jolly Green Giant, and Norma happened to have a green sweater on that day. And we wheeled her in her wheelchair up to this giant, and she locked the wheels of her wheelchair, climbed out of it, handed Tim her cane because she didn't want that in any photograph. And she stood at the base of the Jolly Green Giant, put her hands on her hips, just like he was standing, and just posed with her chin up, and everything changed. All of a sudden, she showed us that and gave us permission to experience joy. And it went from the idea of here we are traveling with my mother-in-law or with mom or with Norma to this is a character. And that's where she became Miss Norma at the base of the Jolly Green Giant in Blue Earth, Minnesota. And at that point we thought, oh, this is going to be fun. Like we didn't even consider that she was ever going to be very silly. That wasn't much of her personality. And so I snapped a bunch of pictures. We buckled over laughing, and off we went. We decided that we are in control of our mindset and how much joy we can infuse in our lives, and we don't have to be overcome with grief and depression. And at the same time, I used to, when we were traveling, I used to keep a travel blog, and even before blogs were invented, I write some things up and send some pictures to my friends on email and things like that. And it was really cumbersome. And so I decided that I wanted to keep my family and friends, in the loop about our trip. And so I just threw up this Facebook page. There were a dozen people that were following us, and I called it Driving Miss Norma once she kind of got that new name. And so we had, our dozen people that were cheering us on, and that really helped us as we were having a tough time. And out west we went. We made it to the President's Heads. She really enjoyed Mount Rushmore, and made it to Yellowstone. We walked 8 miles around Yellowstone National Park in one day, pushing her in the wheelchair, and sometimes her pushing us. She'd be like, you must be getting pretty tired. Get out, here, sit down. And she'd get out of her wheelchair and she would push us along the boardwalks, along the geysers in Yellowstone. She's just amazing. But we also noticed at that time that there were some pretty neat things that were happening outside the window as we were driving. And we would look back and say, hey, Norma, did you see? And she would be sleeping. And so we didn't know if it was because of her illness or because of her grief, because of the many, many, many medications that she was on, or if it was, that's what you do when you're 90. We didn't know which one or combination of things caused her to sleep a lot during the day and miss out on some neat things. And so we did an evaluation of her medication and really looked into what she was taking and what she felt like she needed and what she didn't. Now we're untethered from her doctors, and we also were headed to Colorado. And in Colorado in 2015, it was one of only a couple. It might have just been 3 states at that point, but it was the first one that had legalized medical marijuana. And so we wondered if any of that would help her. She was in pain. She has had osteoarthritis since she was 27 years old. So she was taking an opiate pain medication for many, many, many years. And we started to recognize that perhaps that's why she spent a lot of time sleeping. And so we decided that we were going to see if she was game for looking into some CBD medication. And it was a pretty funny interaction. Tim was very uncomfortable talking to his mom about any of the girly things, and vice versa. She didn't really want to talk to Tim about any of her female issues that she was having, and any of the pain that she was having. And so he would kind of pass that off to me when we had to talk about her medical conditions. And but it was his idea to try to figure out this CBD thing. And we're in our car that we towed behind our motorhome, heading to Boulder, Colorado, to go to what she just called a pot shop. And I said, Tim, you got to tell your mom where we're going. And he said, you tell her. And I said, she's your mom. And that was the only time on the whole trip that I pulled that card, like, you need to step up and let her know. And so he said, Mom, we're going to go and get some marijuana for your hands. Her arthritis in her hands were really sore. And she said, oh, no, we're not. We're not doing marijuana. And I said, it's semantics. If you say cannabis, she might be okay with it. So he's like, yeah, you heard a bit about this cannabis stuff, didn't you? And she's like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. And he said, well, that's where we're going. And then she was fine with it. So it was the same thing, but just different words. And we walked into this dispensary, and she was treated like a queen, of coming in, and we talked to them about helping with her pain management. And while we were there, we also told them that she had a cancer diagnosis. And did they hear, because we started hearing about CBD oil that was shrinking tumors and things like that. So we talked to them about her diagnosis, and they said, well, some people have had success taking a little capsule. We knew that she wasn't going to smoke a joint. She wasn't going to eat the brownies and gummy bears and all the kind of stuff that they have available these days. But she might take a pill because she's accustomed to taking pills and vitamins and things like that. And so they had this CBD pill that was available. And so she said, well, yeah, let's try that. So that was on a Monday. And the next morning, on Tuesday morning, she got up and we said, how are you feeling, Norma? And that was the first time that she had taken her CBD pill, and we had cream for her hands for her arthritis. And we said, how are your hands? And she said, my hands are great. They haven't felt this good in years. And that was just, overnight. By Friday morning, Tim was out walking the dog, and Norma came out and she whispered to me, almost like the walls were listening. And she said, I think I stopped bleeding. And she was referring to the fact that she was bleeding through 2 sanitary pads a day with this tumor that was pressing on her uterus. And within 4 days of taking CBD oil, she experienced no blood for the first time in what we learned later was quite a while. And she never bled again for the rest of her life. So it didn't take long for us to get her off of all of the opioids and treat all of her pain issues with CBD oil. And from that point on, we had no issues with her falling asleep. In fact, she had more energy than we did. And other things that were happening before, she was dizzy, her nose was running all the time. All of that went away. And all of a sudden, she got this new lease on life. She would stand up now, and she was much stronger, wasn't wavering when she stood up. And we were like, holy cow. This was about 2 months into our trip with her, and everything had changed. And so off we went. Our next stop after Colorado, we went down to Arizona and went to the Grand Canyon and had an incredible experience there. And then we started heading east and went to New Mexico on our way through. And I won't spoil that for the folks that haven't read the book yet, but our time in New Mexico was probably some of my most treasured time ever in my life. But there's one particular day that was just really magical and the best day for me on this entire trip. And we finally figured out why she wanted to go to New Mexico. We had reservations for Thanksgiving in New Orleans. So we headed across the country from New Mexico. We would have enjoyed spending a little bit of time in different places in Texas, but we got caught in a storm that sounds similar to what's coming your way here pretty soon. There's a whole bunch of wind, and so we just sat tight and didn't drive until the wind passed us by. But so we had reservations in New Orleans for Thanksgiving, and then spent Christmas in Florida and a good part of the winter there. By this time, we started out with our 12 friends and family. By this time, they had been chatting about and sharing our page a little bit, our Facebook page with people that they knew. In fact, one of our friends was so excited about what we were doing. She said, "This is amazing. You guys got to check this out. Let's try to get Miss Norma 100 followers." And we're like, we don't know 100 people. There's no way that's going to happen. And she said, well, let's give it a try. And we said, all right, we'll send whoever ends up being our 100th follower, we'll send them a postcard from wherever we happen to be. So eventually we got to 100 people, and then we would meet people along the way. You know, if we were at a national park or standing in line at a food truck, or, you know, we would go do beer tastings. We were having a great time. And people recognized that and would approach us and say, boy, you don't realize how fortunate you are to be able to have this experience. You know, when we were just, you know, doing papa wheelies in her wheelchair and just giggling and laughing and having a great time. So by the time we made it to Florida, we had, I don't know, 400 and some people that were following us. And that number just started to grow and grow. And there was a day when I looked in the morning and we had 520 people following us. And the three of us talked over breakfast and said, if you add up all the people that the three of us know in the world, we probably still couldn't get to 520. We were absolutely amazed that many people cared about, you know, three knuckleheads driving around in a motorhome. And right around that same time, there was an organization called, maybe some of you have heard of this, you know, the news network CNN, right? This is called GNN, which is the Good News Network. And GNN picked up our story. And I write a little bit about that in the book. But the day that they picked up our story, they sent me a note and said, you know, hey, Ramie, we just posted this story. I hope you like it. And they sent a link. And so I opened up the link to the story that they wrote about us. And they had asked for some pictures and things. So I'd sent them those. And I read the story and I was like, that's lovely. Well, that was a nice story. That's kind of cool. And then I clicked from reading the story over back to our Facebook page. And all of a sudden our 520 number started like flashing and it was going crazy. And pretty soon there was like 637 and 712 and 894. And by the end of the day, we had a phone call from CBS Evening News that they wanted to do a story on the evening news on CBS Sunday morning. And I just went, what have I done? I felt like I have completely ruined the trust of my husband, the relationship with my mother-in-law. I was just sick. I just felt like I wanted to throw up. I was absolutely terrified that our entire lives have changed just from me posting, you know, these pictures from our journey. It was awful, really awful. And Tim said, you got to make this stop. Like, can't you unplug the internet, turn off Facebook? This has got to stop. And then we started getting these incredible messages from people. They were writing on our page, they were sending us private messages, and all of them were positive, and all of them were telling us that we had inspired them to do things that they hadn't thought of before, or that they were afraid to have conversations about, or, you know, I'm dropping everything and driving 9 hours to take my grandma to lunch, and just incredible feedback about how our story was making a difference in other people's lives, which we never, ever imagined, ever. And in our terror, and I mean, we would lay in bed and you could hear our hearts beat because we were so terrified about what just happened to our privacy in our life. And to kind of make peace with that, we decided that if our story allows one other family to have this conversation that has always been the elephant in the room in our family, to talk about what are your wishes at the end of your life, and then follow through with whatever that might be, then we can carry on, and we'll keep this Facebook page going, because it seems like we're helping some families. And that was what started to feel okay for us. I've talked to many people since then, and there's this whole generation, or this whole idea of lots of people that want to be influencers and viral internet sensations and all that stuff. And we were not that family at all. And so we really had to make peace with how are we gonna carry on. So we did, and then we got all of these invitations for things. So the CBS Evening News, do we do it? Do we not? And then pretty soon Ellen DeGeneres called, and do we do her? Do we not? And we said no to her and to lots of other people. And so we were really careful about not putting Norma into any situation she wasn't comfortable with, and anything that had to do with live television, she was like, no, not doing that. So those kinds of decisions started to happen. Reporters wanted to embed with us and travel with us, and we just kind of didn't let that happen. But we got amazing invitations to now do really, really fun stuff. And some of it was out there, like mush dogs in the Iditarod, and come skydiving in California with us, and come over to Holland and we'll show you the tulips, and come to Paris, it's on us. We would love to have Norma in Paris. And we were like, holy cow, this is amazing. And so we started saying yes to little things like maybe a backyard barbecue with someone in a town that we were passing through, and got more and more invitations as we went, and just really had an amazing journey. And so, there's lots of those details in the book about what that journey looked like and the experiences that we had. And then, of course, eventually her health did decline. And we fortunately didn't have to call 911, but we did engage with hospice and getting her hospice treatment. We were on San Juan Island in Washington State, in Friday Harbor, Washington, which you may know, it's an hour and a half ferry ride from the mainland US to get to this island. There's no bridges to it. It's out there. And that's where we happened to be. We were just passing through. We got invited to go whale watching on a whale watching cruise, and visit a lavender farm, and all these cool things that you can do on an island in the Pacific Ocean. And that's when her health started to decline, and she eventually died on San Juan Island with the help of hospice. So with all of that happening, and the whole world at this point following along, by the time she died, we had 500,000 people following us on Facebook. And we were on every media outlet in the world covered us, whether we were involved in it or not. They picked up the story, and she was in front page newspapers in Germany and China and the Al Jazeera network, and we were on the Today Show and NPR, All Things Considered, and it just went on and on and on. And so when her health began to decline, we had a big decision to make of, do we say, we need to have our privacy here, and we're not going to say anything for a while, or do we show what the end of life looks like in this joyful experience that we've had. And by this time, it's over a year later. We were on the road with her for 14 months. And so we, as a family, the three of us talked about it and decided that we needed to be honest with 500,000 people about what does death look like, and what does caregiving in a situation like ours look like. And so we played it out online with people, and the support that we had one of the biggest issues with caregivers is you have this sense of isolation, right? You're in a situation where, your friends aren't really coming around, and you can't go out and have dinner out or go to bridge club or, all the things that maybe you would like to do. Those go away when you're caring for someone with advanced illness. And then especially when you're on the road and you're not bringing your friends with you, so we had the potential to be very isolated this entire journey without any kind of support, emotional support. And we found that our Facebook family became that for us, that they were the buoys that really helped us get through this very tough time and cheered us on. And when she was dying, gosh, it was so incredibly meaningful to have 500,000 people supporting you. It was amazing, incredible experience. So that's in a nutshell. There's many, many, many more details about our journey as caregivers. Since then, we have kind of embraced that role and recognized that the data when we were doing this in 2015, 2016 was 43.5 million Americans were unpaid family caregivers in the country. And since that time, new data has come out in 2020 that number has increased by 10 million more people. So now it's closer to 53 million family unpaid caregivers in this country. So there's so many people out there doing this work quietly behind their front door. Nobody knows what's going on in their lives, and it's hard. It's hard, and it can be isolating. And like us, almost every other caregiver in the country didn't have experience before they had experience. And so to enter this kind of life journey without any training, other than the love in your heart, is tough to do. So one of the things that has become part of Norma's legacy is that we established, because Facebook for us has been our friend, is that we established a private group for caregivers. And anyone who is actively giving care, or who has been a caregiver in the past, or is anticipating that is going to be part of their future, has joined us. We have almost 4,000 people on that group of incredible support that are helping people through. And then, once their loved one passes, so many people are staying on and providing kind of that institutional knowledge of caregivers, or how do I do this and what do I do about that, and has anyone had this situation before? There's incredible support, and we think that that's probably the most powerful part of Norma's legacy, is that that these other caregivers are supporting each other out there and shining a light on something that's been not brought to the public's attention a lot. So anyway, my favorite part about doing all of these things when I talk to groups of people are the questions that get asked. So I'm gonna play a little video for you that gives you an idea of what it looked like for us, because I ended up not taking photos of pretty nature scenes. Most of the photos I took for 14 months were of Norma. And so it's a short little video. And then after that, I would love to entertain any questions that you guys might have about our journey or anything else. So I'm going to try to share this screen here, Heather. Hopefully I do it right.
Miss Norma, so many good years. Your life with laughter and live without fear. News from your doctors say your health is grim, so you'll hit the road with Ramie and Tim. Miss Norma, a life that's been long. Somehow you knew that chemo was wrong. Spend the rest of your days with one lasting trip, and savor each moment with every last sip. No need to be treated in search of a cure. One day at a time, go forth with your tour. Explored open skies, wakes a spark in your eye. Up and away, no need to ask why. Miss Norma, a life that's been long. Somehow you knew that chemo was wrong. Spend the rest of your days with one lasting trip, and savor each moment with every last sip.
There it is.
Miss Norma, teach us how we should live. Get more in return than one ever gives. A true inspiration, you answered his call. As life on the road lets you rise and not fall. Miss Norma, a life that's been long. Somehow you knew that chemo was wrong. Spend the rest of your days with one lasting trip, and savor each moment with every last sip. Savor each moment with every last sip. Savor each moment with every last sip.
Okay. So, Sheila, you. Yeah. Yeah. So, Heather, how should we do this? Can we just have people unmute themselves, or do you want to unmute everyone?
That would be great if everyone just wants to unmute themselves, and we can just kind of go through the list. If anyone has any questions, feel free, to unmute yourself, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. There better be questions. Oh, I hear someone's radio.
Certainly David, tackle.
That was just beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I'm quite anxious to read the book. And one question I do have is, how would you go about signing up for that private group that you mentioned for caregivers?
Yeah. Are you on Facebook, Sheila?
I am.
Okay.
I went out while you were talking and signed up for just your regular one, I guess.
Yeah,
it was like almost 500,000 followers.
Right. Yeah.
But I didn't realize you had one for caregivers also.
Yeah, so it's called, if you go just on the Facebook search bar, it's called Miss Norma's Caregivers Retreat.
Okay, thank you.
And there's also, if you're on the regular one, which is called Driving Miss Norma, the most recent post that I did that was, I don't know, a week or so ago, there's a link to it there if for some reason it doesn't pop up, but it should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious. We traveled in my live.
Yeah. Pat,
Oh,
I hear you.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We traveled, we had motorhomes and traveled, forever and my husband's dream would have been like you did to go, but I always wanted a home base. So we had a home, but when he became ill, that was his biggest regret, that he was done motorhoming, and it was lung fibrosis, and he had oxygen and all of that, and so it accelerated quickly the last couple of months. But I'm really curious, did you ever have trouble finding health care? I mean, I had him at home with help from hospice, but did you have trouble on the road? I mean, that's wonderful that you were on that island and had hospice link and she was able to pass away there. But wow, I can just say from, having been and lived both worlds, that I just take my hat off to you. I've got to read the book too.
Oh, well, thank you. She was done with doctors. She was just done. And if you look at it,
and she looked so vibrant.
She didn't look like that before. And she, every year, they always had a calendar hanging on the refrigerator, right? And the only thing that was written on that calendar every summer when we went to visit were doctor's appointments. It was what kind of encompasses our elders, is that's when they leave their home, is to go to doctor's appointments and maybe to church, and then eventually church falls off because that's too much work, but I still got to go to the doctor's appointments. And she was really, she had it. And so her thing was no more poking and prodding, I die when I die. And so we didn't need to seek out healthcare while we were on this trip because she didn't want any of it. There was one place when we made it to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where we were concerned. We thought, wait a second, we might be over our heads a little bit. And she was showing signs of congestive heart failure at that point. And we wanted to know how we should handle that. And it took us days to convince her to just go talk to a doctor. And we eventually got her just to an ER. And the intake nurse was, saying, okay, when's the last time that you saw your doctor? And she looked at us and she said, has it been about 10 months now, Timmy? And we said, yeah, it's been 10 months. And the nurse gave us this, what, you're 91 years old and you haven't seen a doctor in 10 months. And it's just so happened that was on a Monday, and that Sunday, the day before, we were above the fold on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, a full half-page article about her. And so we said, I guess you didn't read yesterday's paper, so let us fill you in, and told the nurse, what we were up to, and that this is her desire to stay away from doctors as much as possible. And she took us out into the hallway crying and apologized and said, we just don't have these conversations with families usually. And thank you for what you're doing and honoring her wishes. And for us, it was all about dignity and her choices. And, whatever her choice was, we were going to follow along. So that was the only time, other than interacting with hospice, that we sought any support. And so it worked out. I mean, we understand that this approach is certainly not for everybody. Driving around like this at the end of your life isn't for everybody. But what we're seeing is that the conversations can then be had of, I sure don't want to drive around in a motorhome, but what do you want to do, Mom? And so then that conversation evolves. Yeah. Thanks, Pat.
Pittsburgh, my old hometown too. So
mine too. That's where I grew up.
I'm really surprised. I had heard nothing of you before this. I'm just really excited when I saw the topic of the talk and then listening to it now. And yeah, it's like, because I'm on Facebook and I check stuff, but
Yeah.
anyway, just great.
Well, welcome to the party. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marlise, is that how you say your name?
That's close enough.
Oh, well, what's the real thing?
Marlis.
Marlis. Okay.
Did you have any assurance before you left as to what her well-being would be like over the next, like in concerning pain or crises or anything? Did the doctors give you any kind of a input of what to anticipate?
Well, we did go to, after we got the diagnosis from the OBGYN, which was not her primary care doc, we made an appointment with her primary care physician. And at this point, we felt pretty empowered because he said, I want to be in that motorhome. So we went to her general practitioner and got a completely different reaction. And she was very upset with us and thought that Norma should get this surgery. And she said, don't you want to live to be 95? And, really tried to talk her out of going on this trip with us. And she was steadfast and so were we, but again, it was her choice. But we said, the reason that we're here in this appointment with her was to understand all of the medications that she's on and, what's going on. We learned later that she hadn't told her doctor some of the things that were going on health-wise. And so she wasn't being treated for it, like this heart thing, she's like, yeah, it's been happening for a while, but she didn't want to take one more pill. And so she never told her doctor about it. So I think she was really at peace with whatever comes her way. And the big thing was to make sure that she was comfortable and the pain. We wanted to manage the pain. And when we found an alternative solution to doing that improved her quality of life simultaneously, we were very excited about that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Who else? I see all these names, but no video on, and I don't know if those people are there or not, but you're welcome to ask a question, even if your face isn't on the screen.
Hello, can I participate, please?
Yes.
This is Musab. I'm so happy and glad just joining this session. I'm a PhD student at the UW Milwaukee nursing school.
Yes.
And so I took the permission just to join to hear and listen about your experience about the caregiving. I'm originally from Jordan, and we usually take care of our parents and grandparents. And your experience was so excited. So my question is, even though that you have any background about Ms. Norma's illness, so does you talked about the stress and the grief about herself. Have you ever experienced any anxiety, any pressure, any stress of taking care of Ms. Norma?
That's a great question, and my first reaction is, of course, that caregiving is really stressful because we are. I mean, you're going to be. I love PhD nurses because we just get to call you Dr. Nurse, right? But, but the experience of walking into this situation as someone who doesn't have any medical background at all is a little bit intimidating for sure. And so, yeah, there's definitely that stress. Like I said, the support that we had, even though it was this weird virtual support, it was just so nice to know that we weren't alone in the world. And particularly as her health started to decline, hospice was absolutely amazing to be able to lean on and ask the questions and have the conversations that we needed to have. I didn't know about palliative care until after this all happened. You know, I never heard that word before, and now my understanding of palliative care is I think it's the best thing in the world, and that's to have opportunities to go the direction of palliative care. And I've had palliative care docs say, well, what you did was actually palliative care, like they labeled it that.
Yeah, interesting. I'm sorry for taking time. Just one last question.
Sure.
What strategies that you take to cope with this stress and pressure and anxiety?
What did I do personally?
Yeah, like you personally, like rather than relying on the virtual consultation with the Facebook group or hospice nursing. So do you have any like coping strategies that you do and your husband during this time?
Absolutely. And we were fortunate, really fortunate to have each other. So often it's a one-person show and the caregiver doesn't have support, but because Tim and I were both there, we could support each other. And so we made sure that each person had time for exercise, had time for contemplative kind of meditation. And Tim is an amazing cook. And so that's his love language, was to feed us really well. Oftentimes that goes by the wayside, is that, you know, in stressful times, you just eat what you can grab. And fortunately, we ate very well. And so that was another piece of it. So we tried to be as well-rounded and holistic as we possibly could, but I can tell you too, there were some breakdowns where we both were like, we just can't do this anymore. This is too hard. And then you take your next step.
Thank you so much.
Mm. Anyone else?
I would imagine that another great thing that helped you with stress relief, because I know it would me, is having your dog with you.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. And for us and for Norma, he was our dog. It was not Norma's, and she was a cat person, not a dog person. And so she was a little bit intimidated by him early on, but he turned out to be an incredible therapeutic part of our team. And he's actually still alive. He's 14.
Wonderful.
He's 14 and a half years old now. And
terrific.
And my sole focus in life right now is his care. He's definitely, I'm having some deja vu with what his needs are compared to what Norma needed a few years ago.
I can so relate to you. We don't have any children either. My dogs are my kids. And we did have a motor home, and traveling with my husband and dogs was like just so great. But then when he was diagnosed with dementia, he wasn't comfortable, you know, keeping it. And I so wish that we, you know, still had that, and you know, put more of the responsibility for driving. I would have been able to do that, but you know, they get in a frame of mind where they don't reason or logic right all the time. So anyway, I envy you, and I thank you for sharing this with us.
Are you still full-timing? Or have you settled into a base? I noticed the bookshelves behind you. So.
Right, exactly. So we've had an interesting journey since Norma died. She died in September of 2016. And our book came out in the spring of 2017. And we spent the winter writing and editing and, getting all that stuff done. And then we did that in Mexico. And we came back to the States and then immediately went on a 15-city book tour in our RV. And we were all over the country.
Wow.
Pardon me. And then we ended up, the last stop on the book tour was back in her town in Michigan, in her library. And so we had the library, it was a tiny little library, and we exceeded the fire codes and, had all these people there. And then we were at her house that we had left, by this time, about a year and a half later. Well, no, it was about a year after she died. We ended up back in her house that we didn't.
You hadn't sold.
No, and we hadn't even cleaned it. We were just like, let's go. And so here we are back there. And now without her, without Leo, and after having this absolutely life-changing experience and riding this wave of love across the country, that we just hit a wall of deep, deep grief. And that's when it hit us. But it was, several months after she died, because it was almost like we didn't have time to grieve. We were on a deadline for this book and then had to go and, talk to all these people. And it wasn't until we got back to her house and we were like, what are we going to do? And I was just kind of being a smart aleck and said, and we both just really didn't feel like crawling back in the motorhome and driving around anymore. And, there was this emptiness about it. And I said, let's just get a boat and live on a boat for a while. And Tim doesn't even swim. Like, we don't know how to drive a boat. And so anyway, the short story of that is we ended up buying a boat and then went on a journey. Has anyone ever heard of the America's Great Loop? Have you heard it? Yeah. So it's a 6,000 mile circumnavigation of the Eastern United States. So we started in Lake Michigan and went through downtown Chicago and got dumped into the rivers, and we're going down the Mississippi River, and then eventually ended up in Mobile, Alabama, went around Florida, and then into the intercoastal waterway that takes you all the way up to New York City, went past the Statue of Liberty on this tiny little boat, and then into the Erie Canal, and then across Lake Ontario, and then up into Canada. And then there's a series of locks that take you over the Canadian Shield, and dump you back into Lake Huron, and then eventually back into Lake Michigan. So it's a big circle. And it took us a year to do that. Wow. And so that was pretty amazing. And then we lived on the boat for a couple more years, traveling up and down the East Coast mostly. And our plan was it was small enough to have it trailered to the West Coast. And we were going to cruise to Alaska through the Canadian Inside Passage. And that's right when the COVID lockdown happened. Mm-hmm. And our friends out on the same island, where the exact same spot where Norma died, they said, well, come on out here. And then, once this thing passes and they open up the Canadian border, have your boat shipped and off you go to Alaska. Well, we thought that was going to be a couple of months, and, obviously that didn't work out. So we've since sold the boat and have been living on the same property where Norma died, in our friend's barn. They have an apartment in their barn. And so that's these bookshelves behind me. But the exciting news is that Tim is not here right now, because he is in the process of driving home our brand new RV. So we're going to hit the road again. So
great.
Yeah. So we're very excited. We've been here for a year and a half, and we're getting itchy. Like, it's crazy for us to not have moved for that long. So we'll be back on the road by spring.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are you, at some point in the book, I recall you saying something about you were working in education or something?
Yeah, I was a high school counselor.
Okay, so now you're not working at all, neither you nor your husband.
Right. Tim's older than I am, and so he's been retired for a while, and we decided, every time we went on a trip and then we came back home, within 2 weeks, I was like, let's go. And so at some point it wasn't making a whole lot of sense for us to live in a house, because that wasn't where our heart was. And some things were happening with our school district, and lots of things changed. And so it made sense for me to exit at that point. And we just went for it and have been full-time, no bads ever since.
That's great.
Yeah, but I miss working with teenagers. I love them. Anyone else? Karen?
No, I just enjoyed everything. It's a wonderful story, and I'm just amazed that I never heard of it until I saw this article in our senior newsletter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do read the paper every day, and I sometimes watch those morning shows and things like that. And I had never heard of this book, and it
Flipped through. Yeah.
And I also wonder if my children would do that for me.
Well, now's the time to ask them.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Yeah. We find that people enjoy, once they read the book, they enjoy giving it to either a generation ahead of them or a generation behind. Like they give it to their parents or their kids. And then that's when it starts the conversation. And there was a gentleman, he's the executive director of the Coalition to Transform Advanced Care. It's a big Washington, D.C. lobbying group that has to do with lots of end-of-life issues. And he found us, he saw a story, while Norma was still alive and we were on the road, and he got a hold of us and asked us to do some things with his organization. But the thing that touched me so much was he said, this is my job all day, every day, to talk about end-of-life issues, advanced care, advanced directives, having conversations. And he said, and I can't do it with my own mom. I'm terrified. It's really hard to do. Why am I so stuck with this? And he said, until he saw a picture of Norma drinking a beer, and then the attached story that went along with our journey. And he sent it to his mom. And he said, hey, what do you think about this lady? And how she's doing her golden years, or however he put it. And she wrote back, she's like, yeah, I think I'd rather have wine than beer. And all of a sudden, there it was. He had the conversation and he was so excited. He said, I thought that it was going to take some kind of, scientific formula with lots of data and research for me to be able to break this roadblock that I had with my mother. And he said, it just organically happened because Norma was drinking a beer. And so he thanks us all the time now because he knows what his mom wants. It's really cool.
Do you have any data as to how many families in America have family members taking care of their elderly parents?
Yeah, that's that number that I mentioned early on. And it was 6 years ago, it was 43.5 million. Now it's over 53 million people in the US caring for their loved ones.
Out of how many?
What do we have? About 300 million? I think there's around 330 million people in the country. So it's like a quarter of our population. I think I need to get better on that data, but it's a lot. It's a lot of people. I'm 56 years old, and I was talking to a friend of mine this week who is, I think, 51. And we were talking about the fact that all of our friends, everyone that I grew up with, everyone I went to college with, everyone that I interact with that's in my age group right now is caring for a parent. And I never recall anyone ever telling me that that's how you spend your 50s and 60s, is that's that stage of, I've studied, psychology for a long time and all the different stages of life. And that's never been brought up of, yeah, by the way, from 50 to 60 some, you're going to be paying attention to your parents. And so it's interesting that it's very true in my small little data set of my friends. Everyone, they call, now I become this expert that's not an expert, but they're calling me, talking to me about their parents and what they're doing with them.
How wonderful that you had all these opportunities and time to spend with her, because for the past 2 years with COVID, people with parents in nursing homes weren't even allowed to go and see them.
Yeah.
To me, that's just cruel.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot. I mean, we feel so blessed that window of time happened before COVID. I can't imagine how families are doing. You had her with you, so you were able to be together. Yes.
If I had been in a nursing home these last 2 years, my grandchildren couldn't come and see me, my children couldn't come and see me, but I'm in my own home, so they have been able to come in.
Good.
But I have said to them, if I need, don't put me in a nursing home, because if something like this happens, I need to be able to see you and touch you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hard. Yeah, so keep having those conversations with them, and that they become our kids become our advocates, and we learned that loud and clear, that our having her back gave her permission to then live the life that she wanted, and the more the conversations are there and the clearer all the family members are about what that particular family member, what's important to them, then the better the decisions are. So often it happens when there's a crisis, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do we do? And they can't talk. And so they can't tell us if they wanted to, have this procedure or not. And so having those conversations ahead of time, really important. In Wisconsin, I looked this up the other day, preparing to talk with you guys. There's a document called the 5 Wishes. Have you guys heard about that? It's a legal advance directive that's really user friendly. And it's in most states, including in Wisconsin. It only costs $5. People think that you need to hire a lawyer and do all these things, but you can get your hands on a 5 Wishes document and go through that with whoever you want to be your primary person, that's making decisions for you if you can't. And it's really a good conversation starter. We used that with Norma and it helped tremendously.
I read that you were very influenced by Atal Gawande's book.
Yes.
Being Mortal.
Yes.
Is that kind of parallel to this 5 Wishes?
Yeah, I think it marries together. Have you read the book, Being Mortal? So that book is, Atul Gawande is a high level doctor who did lots of research on end of life and things that are important. And I just happened, it was a total fluke that I happened to pick it up. It was on my friend's nightstand when I was visiting, and read that book just 2 weeks before we walked into this family crisis. And the clarity that it provided me, and then consequently Tim as well, was remarkable. And so I can't speak highly enough about that book and the insight and perspective that it provides when you're looking at end of life issues. The 5 Wishes is it's like a little pamphlet. It's 5 pages and you check things off, and so they're asking very specific questions about, who your medical power of attorney is, and then under what situations you want what kind of care. And then it also has a really human edge to it about how do you want to be cared for in your last days? Do you want your favorite songs to be played? Do you want people to read to you? Do you want to be massaged with essential oils? Norma wrote in, she checked that, she said yes, and then she wrote in lavender, like I don't want anything else, I just want lavender oil. And so it's those kinds of things too, of what do you want your environment to be like? Do you want to be surrounded by, lots and lots of people, or do you just want to kind of be real quiet and pass peacefully on your own? And those are all things that are kind of addressed in that 5 wishes document.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's getting close to the end of our time, but I just want to thank you very much, Ramie, for sharing with us. It's just been an excellent evening.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I love doing this. And if you haven't read the book yet, please do. There's lots of books in libraries all over the country. And yeah, we love to hear from you. So you can send us a note. Our webpage is just missnorma.com. Pretty easy to get to. So.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Any last questions or comments?
Thank you, Ramie, so much for sharing this with us. And I'd also like to thank Heather and La Crosse Public Library. I just happened upon finding out about this. I guess it was meant to be. And I'm so glad that I did. So thank you for making it available.
Absolutely. It fills me up to actually talk to people. I've been pretty isolated the last 2 years too.
Yes, I'm from Michigan, as other people, three other people on this Zoom call, and I just wanted to tell you that we're having your book as our book club selection this month.
Oh.
And do you have any discussion questions posted online?
I do. Yeah, there's on the missnorma.com page. Actually, if I share the screen real quick, can I do that, Heather? Do I have time?
Sure.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me pull it up. Let's see. So this is the main page when you get to it, to missnorma.com. And then you'll see driving Miss Norma, and then a drop-down menu.
Oh.
And there's a thing that says Miss Norma's Book Club. And if you click on that, then there are all kinds of conversation starters, depending on what topic you want to talk about. So you want to talk about food or faith or lessons that we learned or whatever, it's all there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I just noticed that people have been putting stuff in the chat. It looks like, Heather, is this you? That 16% of the population are caregivers.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And then there's a link to the 5 wishes and a link to being mortal. So anyone who wants to collect those links before we sign off, I guess, can do that. In that video that I showed, if you're interested in showing that at your book club or anything like that, you just go to home on the Driving Miss Norma page, and there it is. So you're welcome to share that with your book club friends or something if you'd like to do that. And then once again, the caregiver page is Miss Norma's Caregivers Retreat, and that's on Facebook. This has been great. Thanks, you guys.
Oh,
Absolutely.
it has been. The time has went by so fast.
Oh, good. Good. It's
Really
dark
has.
out here now.
Yeah.
So
It gets
my
dark
sunny
early.
windows.
Here, and it's cold too out there. So
Yeah.
it's
Be
nice to
careful.
here.
Yeah, it looks like that storm is headed your way. So
Yeah.
be careful out there. Nobody's allowed to fall. We're determined to keep people from falling. That seems to be the beginning of the end for many, many people. So,
Stay upright.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Heather, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ramie, for sharing your incredible journey with us. And thank you everyone for sharing your time tonight. And this meeting was recorded. So if you want to watch it later or share it with a friend, you can certainly do that. So thanks again. And if you haven't read it, please grab the book, stop by your local public library. We've got copies here at La Crosse Public, and feel free to share the story with others. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Have a good night and take good care.
Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.